Hello and welcome to another episode of the War Boys podcast with Ben Cohn and Mose Blonner. This is a new thing we're trying. It's our rapid reaction. I'm just reacting to today's news about a potential terrorist attack at a Russian opera house in the suburbs of Moscow. Right now, ISIS is claiming responsibility, but the whole thing is murky, right? You can never really be certain, right?
Yeah. I think earlier today, the news broke, along with a lot of amateur video coming out from people inside the venue of gunmen storming in. The building was on fire, according to the Russian state, roughly 40 people are dead with more than 100 wounded. As you said, ISIS has claimed it, but that seems to be a little bit on edge on whether that's true.
Because no one's heard from those guys in a while. Right?
Yeah, seriously. The Syrian civil war is still sort of slow burning, but they haven't really been players in it.
Yeah.
What I found really interesting was that the Russian state kept referring to them as bearded. That was a big descriptor for the people,
which would imply that they're trying to imply that they're somehow Chechen or Dagestani or from the Caucasus.
Yeah, that's really what they tend to mean with that. And it does bear sort of an eerie similarity to the 2002 opera house siege and hostage crisis that ended with 174 people dead.
I don't know if there was ever any evidence that was a false flag, but I know that there's more speculation about the 1999 apartment bombings that killed a couple hundred people because it was very similar to this. There was an election, Putin won, as he does.
Of course.
5% of the vote. Then there was these bombings of these apartments. Hundreds of people were killed, and then weeks later, the Russian invasion of Chechnya, second Russian invasion of Chechnya, commenced. So, I don't know. I mean, again, it's all speculation right now, but...
Was that after his first election as president?
Yeah, and I think, actually, things weren't going so well at the time. The Russian economy, I mean, this is like only a couple years post-Soviet collapse.
Yeah, the voucher system was still in, chaos.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a classic move by an authoritarian leader to create a justification. I mean, to be real, we've done it. Remember the Lusitania,
Sure. Remember the Maine.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something that if you need a justification for something, you create one.
I mean, it's striking to do it in your capital city against your own people. That seems like a little bit more ham-handed than they're used to, but
yeah.
Then again, I think there's a lot of people in Russia who are sort of on the fence, and even if he comes down on all these people and they all are killed, it's still a massive embarrassment to the Russian state, to have an attack go down in your capital city of that magnitude.
Yeah, and that was also what was odd to me about the videos is you see these guys roaming free around the building.
Yeah.
You would think there would be at least one guy or, I don't know, ticket guy, security guy, some mall cop, because they come around. I guess they probably saw the AKs, and somebody apparently had a flamethrower. And
I would probably back up if there was a flamethrower too, if I'm being honest. It's
they don't pay me enough rubles for this.
Yeah, that's definitely a not my pig, not my farm situation.
But even so, you'd think Moscow, even if it's in the suburbs, there would be a team, armed response within minutes.
Yeah.
Right? Because it seems to me, from the timeline of the videos, that they started shooting in the theater, worked their way out into the lobby, shot a bunch more people, then set the place on. I mean, that's got to be 10. I mean, maybe everything seems quicker, right? But
no, but that takes time. It's a huge building. I think part of it is that my understanding is that when something like this goes down in Russia, it tends to sort of jump over a lot of governmental levels. It goes from local cops to state response very quickly. Compared to, America, where, you have your local cops and then you have an emergency service unit or a SWAT team who shows up as sort of a quick reaction force and can sort of attend to the problem relatively quickly, unless it's rural Texas, and then that's a different story.
And then there's that trope where everyone's arguing about who has jurisdiction.
Exactly.
This is my jurisdiction. I'm the sheriff. And he's like, well, I'm the state police.
Yeah.
I'm the FBI. So it's like,
But at least we have those quick response units, and it's sort of interesting that it falls into the same foibles that they've had with like their invading force of not having like a medium sized response, or like they don't have like the
something more nimble.
Yeah, exactly. Like the same way in their military, they don't have like an NCO corps.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they don't have that like flexibility within their institutions.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to see how this develops. And I'm trying, like with everything, I'm trying to figure out what the angle is here. Like for Ukraine, I mean, Ukraine didn't do it. It was ISIS. According to them, but like originally I was like, oh, could this have been those Freedom of Russia Legion guys or some Ukrainian partisans? But then they kept stressing the bearded thing, and specifically the beard with no mustache.
Yeah,
it's like a Chechen, well, it's just a Muslim thing, but more specifically associated with some of these guys like Khabib. And,
the Chechens and Dagestanis. Yeah. Also, I mean, it would be very surprising to go from like, border skirmishes, like basically getting towards like Rostov on Don, to suddenly striking into the heart of Moscow. Like that would be a pretty big leap for them,
There was a drone a few months ago. I remember like one or two drones that like snuck through all the air defenses and one like blew up next to the Kremlin.
Yeah,
it was just sort of to show that they could do that.
Yeah.
So
but again, I think that,
it wouldn't serve them in any way.
Yeah, in fact, it would sort of weaken their moral position, right? It would make them seem a little like heartless to just be killing civilians, and they're sort of reliant on keeping the moral high ground through all of this. Like, especially given that France just announced that they're going to continue backing Ukraine.
Yeah.
I do like going back to the Chechen thing. I sort of wonder if this is them finally like taking the opportunity. They're seeing like that Russia, it's not necessarily weak, but they appear to be in a certain amount of turmoil, and like
the forces are definitely occupied.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, oh, maybe this is our opportunity to like liberate ourselves, or at least start the conflict up again, because that would definitely stretch the Russian army even thinner.
If Russia had to pivot and fight a war in Chechnya, it would be disaster for them.
I mean, that would be their third, and the two times before have been so horrible that like they couldn't really stomach them, and ended up like using some of the most brutal tactics to finish it quickly.
No, I mean, the only reason they were able to win is because they didn't leave them anywhere to hide.
Yeah.
They turned Grozny into rubble.
Yeah, I mean, very famously, there's a Russian folk song called "Don't Tell My Mom I'm in Chechnya," because like it was such a brutal war.
Yeah. Also, one of the first times where people on the internet and elsewhere were like, there was videos I remember coming out from because it was sort of a lot of the like Mujahideen, the international Islamic terrorists, all went to Chechnya to fight for them.
Yeah,
and they always had a great media department.
They do have a great PR.
There's still videos to this day that you can find of just like a Russian column just driving through Chechnya with like Islamic music in the background, and then they all just get blown up by like 300-kilogram car bomb.
Yeah,
or ambushed, and it's just like, oh man, it's brutal stuff.
That was sort of right at the like the crest of the internet, right? Like right as that was becoming more widespread, like people were getting video on cameras and video cameras on their phones, where it was like, it was potato quality, but at least it was like out there, and it made the Russians look like silly and a little like,
because it's like supposed to be, again, it's like with Ukraine, it's like this is supposed to be this world's second greatest army being defeated by essentially the Flip-Flop Brigade, which is like they've been a constant throughout history, but like to see on video these guys basically with rags, long beards, they look like wild men, and they come out with like rusty AKs and like they're building these homemade bombs, and they're winning against this modern conventional army.
Yeah,
like I just think a war there. I mean, I've always sort of felt like it can't, just because they suppressed them so brutally and they installed this warlord Kadyrov, doesn't mean that there still isn't that sentiment among some people. Like, huh? What? Back after that rude interruption. There's somebody climbing on the balcony.
A Chechen militant. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I'm with you guys.
But I mean, again, just like going back, I think it's to like the event itself. I think it's a real embarrassment for Putin. Like, he was just elected. He was elected on like a platform, to my understanding, of like stability and security for the Russian state, and like almost immediately after the like what everyone kind of considered to be like a sham election, like, people were setting the voting boxes on fire, dumping ink into the voting boxes, like a massive terrorist attack happens that like basically shows that they can't even protect their own citizens.
Yeah.
Like, it's a massive embarrassment and probably a huge blow to the morale of the Russian people.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Let's see where it goes.
We'll check back in a few weeks and see what the State Department tells us.
Yeah. Right. I just, again, I don't, it feels like ISIS hasn't been relevant for a while. They've practically been eliminated from their actual, like.
Yeah, it's a weird one for them to be like that. Yeah, that was us. Like, yeah. I feel like there used to be like ramp up for them. Like, they would do like couple of bombings, and then it would ramp up and up and up. But like, to do something so absurdly violent out of nowhere does not really seem like their style, at least to my eye.
For some reason, when you were saying ramp up, I just imagined like a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where Larry's talking to ISIS and he's like, "You got to ramp up. You can't just start with the big attack. You got to ramp. You got to ramp up."
No one's gonna know. No one's gonna remember you. What, ISIS? That's so long ago.
So many. Oh, come on. That was so 2017.
It's like if the Tamil Tigers
Yeah.
did it, like who, or Shining Path, like who remembers them?
It's like, oh, we're still here. It's, oh, okay.
Damn, for real? Good for you guys.
Yeah, but man, some of the videos, I mean, not to be like callous, but it reminded me of a very controversial part of Call of Duty. What was it, Modern Warfare 2, I think?
I believe so.
It even gave you the option. I remember when you were playing, like, are you sure you want to do this mission? It's
the no Russian, yeah.
And it's literally a bunch of Russian ultranationalists, perpetrating a massacre in an airport, as justification for a war. So, again, like, we're not. I don't think we should be hypocritical, because it's not like we've never done anything to justify something like a war,
or seven, but.
Yeah. But I don't know. I have a hard time believing the ISIS thing, and but I also have a hard time. I feel like Chechen separatists make the most sense from my standpoint. Like,
agreed.
They could have been Chechen separatists that basically went to ISIS and said, "Hey, we're gonna do this."
Yeah, like you said, the international sort of like Islamic regime.
They're like, "Hey, we're gonna carry this out. Like, if you want, you can claim it, but we're not really, because there's no, as far as I know, there's no Chechen resistance movement that's been named that they could have claimed responsibility.
Yeah, I think it's just sort of like Chechnya, like they all kind of hate Russia, so they're just like, all right.
Yeah, it's weird though, because some of them must, but there was also a large brigade of Chechens fighting on the Russian side. Like, pretty large.
My understanding is that those were mostly conscripts, but...
I mean, Kadyrov is basically a warlord, so those men are loyal to him personally.
Yeah. So, but I think my understanding is a lot of the country, the semi-autonomous state of Chechnya is pretty anti-Russian, given the like treatment in the 90s. Similarly, I think the semi-autonomous region of Dagestan is like pretty anti-Russia, and there's a lot of like crossover. Like very famously, Khabib Nurmagomedov's coach he is on the Russian most wanted list. Oh yeah, but he's like
Is he not allowed in Moscow? Or
no.
Is he not allowed in Russia?
No. Well, they live in Dagestan, but
yeah. Oh, so.
But it's sort of a gray area.
They don't feel like going up there and.
Yeah, for one guy, I think it's like really, really tough. It's sort of the modern Sparta, but that's maybe a topic for another episode.
They mentioned something about where these guys were from that starts with an I, and I can't remember what it is, but I think where the attackers were from. ICE statement casts its claim as an attack against Christians. What? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, if they're ISIS.
Yeah, but like, why not attack a church or something?
I will say it's very interesting that the State Department, like 2 weeks previously, had said, like, hey, if you're an American, avoid large crowds and avoid, crowded areas and specifically venues and opera halls. And
well, they might have known something, and they just don't really.
They're just not looking to cut.
Yeah. They're not gonna be like, hey, FSB, like, there's this potentially, horrible thing that's gonna happen. I mean, maybe that's the right thing to do, but it doesn't make any geopolitical sense.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
All right, so just reading a little bit more about it, I saw a number of reports that their Russian authorities are claiming that these guys are from the Ingush region, which, for those unfamiliar with the Caucasus, is basically formerly part of Chechnya, right next to Dagestan. It's the smallest part of Russia, right? Or the smallest.
It's the smallest satellite region, yeah, and interestingly, has one of the highest life expectancies.
Must be all that goat milk.
Yeah, despite being constantly tossed in turmoil and chaos by the Russian state and by their attempts to throw off the Russian state. Just reading very quickly into it, look, there was an ethnic cleansing there in 1992. They were caught up in the First and Second Chechen Wars, and they seem to basically continue to be caught up in military actions.
Yeah, but it sounds like maybe the insurgency carried on. I mean, it is one of the most southern parts of Russia, majority Muslim. And there was an attack a few weeks ago down there, and the FSB claimed to have neutralized 6 militants. And ISIS also claimed to have been responsible for a couple of attacks there in the last year in the region. So there is some evidence of activity down there. So if these guys are really from there, that would they're from the Ingush Republic. That would really make sense. But I'm assuming that they're not that different from Chechens or Dagestanis.
They speak roughly the same language, but they are ethnically different.
Very cool flag.
Yeah, overall a very interesting place. But like I said, that's definitely something for a later episode. One thing, they're Sunnis with a Sufi influence, which is kind of rare in that region.
Yeah, no, I mean, the whole region is fascinating, and there's so many moving parts. But Russia's meddling, in it has gone on for hundreds of years. But more recently, they basically worked to divide and conquer. And I mean, with the Chechens, it almost feels like they just pummeled them to the point where they were so just messed up that they almost just got Stockholm syndrome in a way.
Well, some of them have. I don't know. It seems like not all of them.
No.
I think we could point to this attack as case in point.
Yeah. So I feel like these guys could have been local fighters that had just pledged to ISIS, or there's some numbers here that at one point over 5,000 people from this region were fighting for ISIS in various parts of the world. So these could have been ISIS soldiers that were fighting somewhere else and then returned home and sort of came up with this attack. But we'll have to just wait to learn more. Thanks for listening to this has been our rapid response segment of the War Boys podcast, and coming up next will be a episode breaking down the conflict in Haiti. Thanks for listening.